we have Camille, and I don't know if Camille knows this, but she is actually one of the reasons why I joined Brokers Hub Realty.
Wow.
I've known Camille for a few years now, just small conversations from organizations and from just meeting at places. When she posted that she was joining Brokers Hub and all the great things she had to say, I was like, okay, let's do it. But this is not about me. This is about Camille and her expertise. 15 years in the business, rock star, just rock star. She has got that historic district down. And one of the amazing things about Camille is that she comes from an appraiser background. So we would love to hear from Camille and just have this conversation of how she uses that background to get listings and sell houses.
Thanks, Marco. That is such a wonderful welcome. I feel so flattered and honored that you would even mention me and your reasons for coming over. I think that's amazing. Thank you. Yeah, I want to provide value in this short time that we have together to the brokerage. So, obviously open for questions, but later, if I don't cover a topic that somebody wants to know, because this is a very broad topic, but in the short time that I have with you, basically, I wanted to go over how I nail value and what I do, what's my process, because everybody has something different. We all tweak our processes and we all come at it from different angles. But what I'm basically trying to do with my appraisal background is I'm trying to make it so I can substantiate value. So I will listen to the client. I will list where they want to list if they have a compelling reason to, or if they really need a certain dollar amount. But at the end of the day, once we get under contract, if that house can't appraise, then I'm basically setting my seller up to lose. So I have a process that I go through. If that's of interest, I can go through it.
If whatever your approach is, because when we were talking before we came on, we kind of talked about the fact that a lot of us, the biggest struggle, especially in this market, is finding the accurate value, right? Because we're not crazy and saying like we used to be. Things are popping off the shelf. So I think that hinders the ability to actually find a true value sometimes. So by all means, share, take us through the approach. Like, hey, you're coming to do a listing presentation, and we're all the sellers. And so just kind of roll with that. And for those who just joined, welcome. We're talking to Camille. She's going to basically start sharing with us her approach on how she establishes value, makes it when she lists houses because of her appraisal background and whatnot. So just kind of take us there. We're all sitting at the kitchen table, and you're trying to convince us what to sell our house for, because we want to sell it for 1.5 million and it's only worth $1 million. So 3, 2, 1, go.
That's the perfect place to start. I do not sit down at the kitchen table. So just so you know, 90% of my listing presentation is not a listing presentation. It is a value nailing proposition. So I go into a house and I tell somebody ahead of time, I'm going to need 2 hours. And I mean it. I'm going to need at least 2 hours, because as soon as we get there, I might set my stuff down. If we have to talk about the timeline, I'll do that. I'll sit with you. If it seems like you need some emotional check-in, I'll sit with you. I'll connect with you first. But my strength is nailing value. So I get up and get going right away. And I say, can we take a tour? So when I walk a house with a seller, I'm trying to determine whether or not it can sell through FHA or conventional. And for those of us who do a lot of, historic or older homes, FHA is sketchy, right? So if you can make the house go FHA by doing a few significant improvements, and we can go through that in detail later, I can send the company a list of FHA things that I look for, like wood to earth contract or dry rot or, chipping paint, things like that. Broken glass is a big one. Water stains. I go on. If I can actually walk through a house and make sure that the seller has a punch list, I create a wants versus needs punch list. I recommend everybody doing this with your seller and emailing it to them. The seller is going to be very overwhelmed when you walk through the house. So if you can actually write down a list, if I write down a list and they don't have to take any notes and they can just be an open vessel, open channel with me, then I title the email wants versus needs punch list. It's very straightforward. And then I walk through and I literally take notes of everything I see that's going to be an FHA requirement if we decide to go FHA. If the house has just too much and cannot go FHA, needs to go conventional or even cash, then I will cater my wants versus needs punch list to the conventional loan still. Conventional loans.
So as you're going through this initial punch list and walking the house with the seller, as I kind of, you'll see where I'm going with this. So I told you the first thing I do when I sit down with the seller is, hey, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to tell you what your house is worth, and if you don't like what I have to say, you can ask me to leave, right? Because I'm not going to be that guy that let's stick a sign in the ground and woo, and sit for 7 months and pray to baby Jesus that sells. So when you're
Yeah.
making your list, are you ripping this off like a Band-Aid with the seller, or are you just kind of keeping the list to yourself and kind of, casually pointing things out and then kind of formulating that to kind of, okay, so here's everything that we talked about or I talked about. I want to share with you. Here's the breakdown of what I'm saying, why we can go FHA or can't, conventional or cash, that kind of thing.
I'm on the spot diagnosing. So I'm
Okay,
like
cool.
a doctor going through and I'll say, actually, this is a deal breaker. Like this is
Right
not
on.
you cannot go FHA with this issue because I'll get their macro perspective up
Yeah.
front. So I can say, okay, what's your budget? And then I can titrate my advice based on their budget. Because you don't want to tell somebody that wood to earth contact has to be remedied on their entire house, or when they say their budget's less than $500, you just can't do that.
So the budget, let's back up a little bit so people understand. The budget is saying your clients have this amount of money they can address towards fixing concerns that you come up with, correct?
Exactly. So I do get a macro perspective. I get a timeline and a budget so that I can titrate my advice specifically towards, and my wants versus needs punch list specifically towards that. You have to know who you're talking to, know your audience first, right? When I'm going through the house, if it's determined that painting the front door is one of my best pieces of advice, always gets you a return, freshens it up, usually a pop of color where it's needed, some charm when you can't, bring charm in other places.
So I've heard that, and I researched a little bit. Is it true that houses with yellow doors sell faster than others?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
It's really about the overall perspective. Houses where you replace the front door or paint the front door do sell faster.
Really?
There's something like a 400% return on that.
So everybody call your sellers today. Paint your front door.
Yeah, but paint it the correct one. So knowing your market, and this is where all the agents in the brokerage have to really know their market.
Okay.
It means seeing the houses in your market. You need to know what colors are in vogue with the buyer pool that you want to attract. I know millennials. I know what millennial green is. Do you? Because if you're selling to millennials and you don't know what millennial green is, get on TikTok and figure that out.
Wow.
Interesting.
That is really interesting.
Yeah, so people have specific things that they're going to. Right now, the patterning is more towards stripes and things like that. So when I'm going through a house, when I'm going through a house, I'll look at where could an accent wall go, or if my seller has an appetite for more improvement, they really want to hit a specific number, then I will say, okay, I'm going to look at the architecture ahead of time and look at what design options might be cohesive to elevate that. If I need to bring in a designer, I will. I know a couple of them, but I think you as an agent should be able to recommend a paint color or two. That should be something that's in your wheelhouse.
So boys and girls, that is millennial green. In case
there it is.
It's a soft green. That's a great tile choice when you have a very white kitchen or you have a very white bathroom. Accent with that tile. So this is going a little off topic, but really knowing where you can add a little bit of value is part of your wants list. Okay. So if you have a wants versus needs are the finance issues, right? So your water damage, your roof leak, your so many things I could go into. If you have shrubs on the house, that's often an FHA issue or even a conventional loan issue, depending on your lender. What we're talking about right now is a wants list.
Okay.
When I go through a house and somebody wants a specific number, or I'm just trying to help them sell it, maybe it's a house has a difficult floor plan. It's going to struggle a little bit on the marketplace. What can we do to remedy that floor plan? You got to get creative. You have to see real estate. There is no substitute for seeing real estate. Get your butt in your farm where you're going to be listing a house. Go to 5 listings in that market and just look at them. Why haven't they sold? You should know that. When you sit across from your seller and they're like, well, this one sold for 600. I want 600. And this one's sitting on the market for 600. I don't understand why these two at the same square footage haven't sold. You should know that. You should be in those houses.
That's a brilliant approach. I love that. Because then you're not only looking at the competition, you're creating more value for who you are as a listing agent, right? Because you say, hey, I know the neighborhood. I know what's listed for sale. I know what has sold. And in comparison to your house, these are the boxes that one checks and this one doesn't check. And so to be competitive, you're using those visual tours to your advantage when you're sitting down with the client, correct?
Yep.
That's fantastic.
Hey, Camille, can I ask you a question? This is Jeremy at Fairway Mortgage. We live in a historic district, and I know you work in Coronado a lot. I live in Willow. And it's always been a contention with a lot of agents with guest houses and adding the square footage on the MLS versus doing the main house and then the guest house, because And correct me if I'm wrong, because you have the appraisal background and not myself. And from appraisals that I've received, you don't times the square footage by the guest house, and that's what's added to the value. It's just added on like a pool or something like that. Is that correct? And what do you do for your personal listings? I'm just curious.
This is a great question. I just argued with an appraiser who is appraising my own personal home that I'm selling about this. You're not going to like the answer. The answer is you do what the marketplace, what's common in the marketplace. So when he started pushing back and saying, well, you lumped your GLA, your square footage of your guest house in with your main house, I said, well, if you look at the other 30 listings on the market right now, 5 of them that have guest houses have done the same thing. This is what is common for the marketplace. Fortunately, when you are appraising, or if you're a listing agent in these areas, meeting the appraiser, you need to break out the GLA of the guest house from the main house, because I've seen appraisals where the appraiser did not check and lumped a 3-2 in on a 3-2 appraisal without checking that it was a 2-1 with the guest house. Those things are so important to know. That's why you meet your appraisers. That's why you send comps and you make notes about each one. That's why you have to walk the properties where you're selling. But when I did that, I knew what I was doing. If I was in a different marketplace where that wasn't common practice, I wouldn't have done that.
Okay, so I want to dive into your background a little bit here. How long were you an appraiser?
Great question. It was a 2-year apprenticeship. It's like 5,000 field hours. It was insane.
Wow.
I worked 250 classroom hours. And during that time, I did, a couple hundred appraisals. Once I got licensed, I believe I was licensed for like 2 or 3 years. I let it peter out because sales got so big and it was just taking up too much time. Also, when I was getting my appraisal license, I was pregnant the full time. And then I had a baby. It was in 2013. And that time was a difficult time, if you all remember, if you were in the marketplace. But it started to ramp up around 2013 and sales started to come back, out of the doldrums. Yeah. I just decided it wasn't worth it. It's taxing on your body. Be kind to appraisers, you guys. They are in the weeds. Some of them come from surprise and it's 115 degrees out and there's no shade. Just know that they're doing their best. It's a tough job though.
So if I heard that right, you did 5,000 appraisals in a 2-year internship?
Hundreds of appraisals, 5,000 field hours. So I would count a field hour as like a full day of work. Like I would go in at 8 and I would spend until like 5:30 there and drive around and be in the field looking at houses.
That's impressive.
Massive. Yeah.
In the summer in Arizona.
This is why appraisers do not respect agents, because we have 90 classroom hours. So what they're coming from is like a master's degree and you're telling them what the value is. So be respectful and offer them comps and say, I've been in these houses, so I can tell you why this one didn't sell. They appreciate that expertise. They don't want you to tell them what the pergola is worth.
That's the biggest thing I'm taking away just from this short conversation with you, is going and looking at the competition and understanding what's on the market versus what's sold. So when you sit down with your seller, that's just an added layer of value, because we all know in this market, with the amount of realtors we have, the value that we present is going to be the most important aspect from the initial conversation. Like, I'm worth what I'm going to get paid. I'm worth the check that you're going to pay me. So I love that. I mean, I've done that, but not to the scale you've done it. But just from this little 13-minute conversation, I'm going to start doing that with my listing, because I think that's an invaluable resource. Nice job, Camille.
Good. And you know that when you have a farm, it gets easier to go in and look at the farm. You get used to the houses in it. You've been in that house 10 years ago. Like, I've been in Coronado for 15 years. And I can say on each block, I've been in 4 or 5 homes at least. And so when a home comes back up, I'm like, actually, I know that floor plan. Like, your job should get easier if you have a good demarcated farm over time.
You add value to some questions that your sellers might have. Like, let's say you have a seller and they're like, and you tell them, hey, look, we need a new roof, right? And the seller says, okay, fine. I'll put a $30,000 roof. So that means you're going to list my home for $30,000 more, right? How do you handle that? I
laugh and say, no, that's
great question, Marco. Great.
I laugh and I say, no, that's not how it works. I'm very honest and straightforward with people. And so if I, first of all, I don't say we need a new roof. I say, hey, I think a roofer should look at this. It's never going to be me. I'm a layperson. I am, a peon. But I can tell you what I think an appraiser would call out. And I want to avoid that pitfall when you get under contract. Plus, I explain to people, once you're under contract, you have a very limited scope of power. You no longer have power over your house because it's under contract with another person. So if you want to do improvements, do them now. That's very compelling for a lot of people, because they start to think of, oh no, like maybe I should do this now. You know?
Did everybody catch that? Say that again, Camille, because that's another little just nugget of genius right there.
When you're under contract, you want to stress to your seller once you get under contract, they don't have the power they think they do. They have to ask permission for every improvement. So if the buyer asks for a roof and they ask for a specific roofer, you can't just use whoever you want. You have to contractually agree to the roofer. So you don't have the same amount of power. So doing repairs upfront with the people that you want to do them with is a power move for a seller. I think it's very empowering to tell a seller, this is your choice now. It's not going to be your choice alone later.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like that.
But Marco, to answer your value question, sorry, Chris, didn't mean to cut you off.
You're good.
Answer, I say it's not dollar for dollar, but what it is going to do is going to widen your buyer pool. So if a conventional loan buyer comes and the roof gets called out, most conventional loan buyers at this price point, if it's like sub 700, are not going to be able to afford this. So you're going to have to, at that point, lose the buyer and start over with another one, which we don't want you to do. So what we would like to see, what I would like to see you do is to do the work, the hard work up front to make the house ready to sell so that it sells on the marketplace for the max amount of dollars that it can. But you're not going to get dollar for dollar. The other compelling thing is I'm going to tell them, if we have to sell this to a cash buyer, you're going to take it in the shorts 20%. It's not going to be pretty.
So here's a question real quick, and then Mark, you can chime in. So you spend $30,000 on a roof, and I'm kind of with Mark, but like, okay, I'm going to spend $30,000 on my roof. Why am I not getting all $30,000 of that back as value?
It's really hard to explain this to seller. You kind of have to backtrack a little bit and say, well, to begin with, your house, if the roof is bad, is already worth that much less. So you're just bringing it up to the marketplace standards, basically. It's really not worth what you think it is right now if the roof is that bad where it needs to be replaced.
Interesting.
So it's a little bit tough.
Yeah,
Hey, Camille, can I ask you a question? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Mark.
Just one thing that I've heard you talk over and over, and I think as agents, we kind of don't get to this mentality until we're kind of right at offer or contract, is you've been talking a lot about like FHA, conventional, and as far as like, how do you prep your sellers in the sense like, hey, look, these are the things for FHA, these are conventional. Why is that so important that you're telling them that right away? Can you just let us know why you're telling them that right away?
Absolutely. I mean, buyer pool is everything. If you're not thinking about your buyer pool and you're a specific buyer for a house when you're walking up to a house, don't be a listing agent, be a buyer's agent. This should be intuitive for everybody here that wants listings. You should know the buyer or the likely buyer or the buyer pool that you're bringing in on a listing when you look at it. So if you are in an area like Coronado or other historic areas that are 90% conventional, I don't know the stats, but they're mostly conventional, and you can make a house go FHA, your buyer pool explodes. So if you can bring it up to FHA standards, if you can get that buyer pool increased, you're going to have a lot more eyes on that house.
Fantastic. Jeremy, you had a question?
I did, Kristen. Camille, I know house to house and upgrade to upgrade is different in value, but can you give like a rough estimate, like how much a pool would add to value, a guest house, a new roof, a new bathroom? And I know you mentioned the front door, but any other nuggets that you can say, okay, if you, I don't know, change the hardware in your kitchen, that would add, a couple thousand, something like that.
Yeah, this is where it's really, really difficult because and this is an appraiser answer. And again, you're not going to like it, but it really depends on the marketplace. So if you have a specific question, you're like, hey, my seller wants to know what this specific marketplace, like, let's go to McCormick Ranch, for example, what a pool adds in that area. Very different answer than say Anthem, where 90% of the houses already have pools. So adding a pool is like, actually, you might be detracting from your buyer pool because a lot of people don't want to take care of a pool. So you are that niche house that doesn't have a pool. It's so bizarre how value works. It's a beast based on that grows and ebbs and flows based on the sub market. So the tiny little micro market, right? So in my case, where I am in Coronado, it can add in some cases $25,000, $30,000 worth of value because pools are so rare. We're less than 9%, 9% of the houses have pools in Coronado. So when you add a pool, all of a sudden, everybody's like, wow, that house has a pool. That's a rarity in this area. So to answer your question about the pools on the cabinets, the only way to really assess that accurately is to look at the house as a whole and to say, actually, I think your buyer level, your specific buyer that's going to come in here is a luxury buyer. And these polls look like Home Depot, and it's bringing down the level of the house. So you have to speak to the overall like custom or semi-custom nature of the buyer, or even luxury nature of the buyer. So like Willow is a great example of levels. Willow has baseline, and then there's architectural marvels in there. And you have to know why something that sold at 1,500 square feet for 600,000 is not similar to the semi-custom Tudor that sold for 1.2. You have to understand the nature of the upgrades that you're recommending to your seller and why it makes sense. And don't go for the gold. Like if your seller has a Q3 or a Q4 house, which is just a average quality or slightly above average quality house on an appraisal, don't have them put Q5 semi-custom upgrades in a house. That doesn't make sense. This is why knowing your marketplace is key. And if anybody has like a specific question about a house, like what would you do to this house, you can send it to me anytime. If I have time, I'll take a look at it.
Camille, I was looking at some of the notes that you sent over, and you said one fun thing I've done lately is do comps right in front of your clients at the listing appointment.
Oh.
Can you tell us a little bit? I found that interesting.
You're just opening the book, man. You're just like, oof, here I am. This is how we do this. This is pretty cool. I like your approach.
So this is all learned from, mistakes, right?
Yeah.
I have not liked arguing with people about value after the fact. It's so much more compelling if you're a warm body in person that they can argue with. If you have a difficult seller, say, do you have 15 minutes to go over this with me? Because when somebody hears your thought process out loud, they're going to trust you more. Firstly, they're going to understand that you're a neighborhood expert. You're going to say, this one sold for 100,000 more, but it was because the guest house was over improved. It was basically, rented on Airbnb for $2,000 a month. It was basically like a semi-custom quality of build. It had a pool. It had a basement that was finished. Whatever it is that you need to tell the seller to bring them back down to earth, you can do in person to make sure that they receive that message. Because people will sellers in particular, will look at values on Zillow. They'll look at the pictures and they'll say, well, my house looks like that. Why can't I get that value? You have to talk them through. And it's sad for somebody to be losing $50,000 mentally in their mind when you're sitting down with comps. So don't email that later to them. I always anchor my clients' expectations before I leave to make sure that they're not floating out in space. So I'll say, what do you think it's worth? Just as a ballpark for me, it doesn't influence how I value your house. And if it's out there, I'm sitting down. And I'm saying, okay, let's go over this together. Let's analyze. Let's see if we can get you that much. I want to also stress that one of the major things that I see that's difficult, and I want to make everybody's life better, is when you're sitting down with a seller to tell them why their house is not worth as much, and they have a site factor that doesn't matter to them. So this happens to us a lot, right? Like a church next door, a school across the street, or they back Hayden Road or something crazy like that, right? You have to talk them through what the marketplace values that at. And you have to talk in strong numbers. For example, I found that it's almost a 15 to 20% adjustment to side a main road. You have
really?
to yes.
And the reason why I say really is because I always thought it was 10%. But so now you're saying 15 to 20. And can that be like across the board, not just East Valley, West Valley? If you're back on a major intersection road, whatever, you're going to see that ding.
It can be 10% in some cases if the house is really good and the site factors are mitigated and there's kind of a buffer, like Arcadia. Arcadia is a good example where it's only 10%. But for the most part, I'm seeing when the supply goes up in our marketplace, which it is now, any site factor has people moving on. Wow. So your price has to be super compelling to get somebody in that door.
Interesting.
So we're talking a premium discount.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
That's good to know. Because I always thought 10%, but I actually argued with somebody in my neighborhood because I try to be the expert in my neighborhood. And a cosmetic dentist built this mansion, kid you not, the thing's like insane on 3 acres. There's no land left. And I'm like, it's great that he's building this wonderful, beautiful home, but the value is going to get dinged 10% just because it's right on Chandler Heights, which is one of the busiest roads out here now. And this neighbor of mine was arguing with me like I didn't know what I was talking about. Oh, you shouldn't use this guy. I'm like, really? So I Googled it and sent her the proof of that and even wrote her a card. Hey, I'd love to sit down and have coffee with you. She never responded. But that's another nugget from you. So 10 to 20%, depending on the site variance where the home is at. It's good to know. And that really doesn't matter what the market's right? It just may steer somebody away from not coming back. But if our market's still hopping crazy, you're still going to see that adjustment.
You see the adjustment, but it's lower. If you have
Okay.
very, very, very low supply and you have a great
Okay.
floor plan and your master bedroom's not siding the main road, all these
Yeah.
things have to be true. Like you have to use
Sure.
common sense. It's so hard to determine this, but if you can look at a comp in the neighborhood that has sold by a main road, even going back 5 years,
Okay.
check and then look at the other regular average comp on the market at that same 5-year period, like figure out your baseline adjustment. And you can always ask me for help in doing that too. But I think it's again, a case by case basis. But if I was going to come into a listing appointment where I knew I had a site factor in this market, I would be aggressive.
Okay. Good to know.
What do you mean by it being aggressive? Can you
With
elaborate?
price. So if somebody wants 500,000 for their house and says everything else is comping at 500,000, but it's sides northern, I just went through this. It's 420. That's where we're anchoring.
Yeah. So how'd they take that?
Not well. Well, I want 450 for it. Okay, let's do 450 for 30 days, and then I need your commitment that you'll drop it to 435. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you have like just you saying that when you run into those sellers that have like these high expectations, so you go into it saying, hey, look, that's fine, we can test it, but I need you to commit after 30 days that we're going to drop it to this price. And you tell that upfront, correct?
Yes, I do. It depends on how aggressive they're being with me, but if somebody says, well, I want this for it, I'll say, okay, I don't think it'll sell for that, but I am absolutely willing to try, and I am open to being wrong. I've been wrong before. And I'm going to blast the marketing the heck out of that. I'm going to spend hundreds of dollars online. I'm going to get bodies through the door. We're going to do open houses, flyers, flyer the neighborhood, do mailers to your neighbors. You'll get your best buyers your first couple of weeks. So I really want to price it right. And if you feel like this is right, that's fine. I disagree, but I am willing to try your way as long as you're willing to try my way later.
That's a killer line. Love that line.
I always tell people what I'm doing for them. So like, if you're giving them bad news, tell them how you're working for them. Like if you're saying your house isn't worth that much, but I'm going to blast the shit out of this and I'm going to help you right now to try your point of view, that builds you a lot of good faith, with your client.
Yeah.
You're really trying.
Does anybody have any questions so far? If you do, just unmute yourself and fire away.
I have one question for you, Camille. As an appraiser, a lot of times when every time that I have a listing and the appraiser's coming, I do like an appraisal packet, right? Show them what where I found value and why I should appraise. Going back to your appraiser days, how do appraisers feel about that? What do they want to see on that? How do you do it? I know that's kind of like our one shot to make sure that we let the appraiser know, hey, look, this is priced accordingly, right? So what's your strategy on that?
My strategy is ask first. So be polite and ask, would you like to see these comps would you like me to write some notes on these sold comps? Because I've been in them. So I've seen the inside. The appraiser can't go inside sold comps. So you've got him there. You are the expertise, and that's the only niche that you've got. That's the only opening you've got. If you give him an argument about price per square foot, he's going to laugh at you. Price per square foot is not how value is determined.
Thank you. I've always thought that too, but there's so many people just think it's price per square foot. Like no.
It can be one way to extract value if you are desperate and have no other way to extract value, but it is not apples to apples for the most part. So it just gives you inaccurate conclusions. So don't give your appraiser a CMA.
Yeah.
Meet him or her with comps that have very good notes on them. Not like our house has better Pebble Tech finishing on the pool. That's not that doesn't work. What you can say is, so any fatal flaws, so floor plan issues that he can't see in the photos, had, roof leak, had sewer issues, something that for a fact, because they're not going to spend their time. It takes 10 minutes to get a hold of an agent sometimes. They're going to spend their time calling each listing and finding out why. So you got to know why it sold for so much less.
And not all agents are gonna answer the phone. So we have a question from Nick. When a listing is not selling and the seller does not want to lower the price, what is your conversation with them? Great question, Nick.
So I love to role play this with somebody, like, because it can take all sorts of turns and twists. That's fine. Do you want to just leave it on the market, or do you?
Yeah, go ahead, Mark. I'll role play with her.
Oh, great. So Mark, are you the difficult client? Okay. That's fine. Do you want to leave it on the market, rack up days on market, or do you want to pull it now and relist in spring when you have more buyers?
Well, I just want to make sure that I get top dollar for my home.
Absolutely. That's my job. And I agree. And I think the best way to do that is not to let it sit on market because it starts to stink like a smelly fish. So if you want to take it off, reset the days on market, then we'll list it again in the spring when you have more buyers. Your buyer pool is very small right now. So,
Well, there's nothing we can do right now. I mean, to sell it.
there are things that we can do, not things that I think you're willing to do yet, but when you're ready, we can have that conversation about price reduction. But right now, I think the listing is stagnant. So I can talk about creative solutions if you want, but otherwise, I think we should pull it. Relist in spring. If you don't want to do that, we can just let it sit. But I got to warn you, your offer at the end will be less as a percentage of the list price because of the days on market. So
what would you recommend, we do if I wanted to list it right now? Like I just want to sell it. What's your recommendation then?
I think being a parent is fine sometimes. It takes a couple of
Yes.
rounds for people to like hear you. So no is a complete sentence too. No, I think it's a bad idea. I think it's a bad idea to let your house sit on market. And my job is to do the best for you.
Yeah, I have a fun thing I do. I have them reverse the role. Like you're the realtor, I'm the seller. Reverse it. How would you answer that question? Because then they're like, that's okay, and then it's just it kind of takes a whole another dynamic as well. We have another question. We actually have a couple. How do you discuss the difference between appraised value versus market value to a difficult seller? And this is from Sherry. Thank you, Sherry. Good question.
You're welcome.
That's a great question, Sherry, and it's really hard, but in a nutshell, it's something like this. I will, especially in my analysis that I do later or in person sometimes, but I will say, I think that your house market value is between, let's say, 900 and a million. And I say, that being said, in big, bold letters, I think it may only appraise for 880 to 9. I think the market may be able to bear, or there might be demand at the $1 million range, but I think we're going to have to acquire a buyer who is willing to come in to pay the appraisal gap difference, or you might have to be willing to lower to the appraisal amount, unfortunately, because the comps are what they are. And essentially your house is over improved for the neighborhood. It is a beautiful house. It is exceptional. And I think the right buyer will see that. Whether or not they can pay the difference between the appraised value and the market value is an open question.
Actually, what I'm talking about is sometimes they already have an appraisal and they think that they should not sell for anything less than that because they were given this value from a licensed professional. And then there's sometimes like right now where it's like, yeah, maybe not really right now, but maybe the appraised value is higher, but that's not necessarily where the market value is. And sometimes it switches. Sometimes there is a market value that's higher than the appraised value. Some markets it's less, but it's a difficult thing to get somebody that's what I'm saying. Sometimes the market value is actually less than the appraised value. And I know that people feel that it should be exactly the same, but it's not an exact science.
Yeah. A couple of different things. One, I would call into question the credibility of that appraiser based on market knowledge. Like, unfortunately, that's kind of what I have to do sometimes. I don't know if you have an opportunity to call the appraiser, ask about the comps, ask why he chose certain comps that are inferior, and actually like destroy the credibility of the appraisal if you need to go that direction. That's like a last resort. It takes a lot of work, but especially if the appraiser is like from Gilbert or something, you can say, listen, I hear where you're coming from, but this appraiser spent a couple of hours in our neighborhood and is an expert on analysis, but is not an expert on this house and not an expert on each block like you and I are. And we know that the appraisers are largely going based on square footage and based on not seeing the inside of houses. I can tell you, I've seen the inside of these 3 houses. They are not.
Well,
I'm
actually saying, like, if you have a difficult listing, like I have a difficult listing that I had pre-appraised by an appraiser that I love. She's very, very good. But then to say, this is where we can start because the values were all over the board, but this does not mean this is where we're going to end.
Yeah.
That's what I was talking about. Because I'm talking about a bad appraiser. I'm just talking about the difference between market value and appraised value. No, it's funny because my appraiser was like, well, they should be the same. I'm like, well, they should, but they're not.
Yeah. In that case, you could be talking about a declining market or you could be talking about stagnant market. Remember that appraisals take data in arrears. So they're taking data that just happened months ago, right? And right now, you and I know that the market is very different right now than it was in September. So So, I mean, I think everybody's seeing that, right? You're feeling a flux of buyers. So
Sure.
remember, when appraisers come in and appraise, they're only appraising the last 3 to 6 months. So you have the real-time market data. The most salient measure of value is what a current willing buyer will pay for it. That's what the
that's a
appraisal
great
guideline
quote.
is.
That's what I love. That was a great quote.
The most salient indicator of value is a current buyer who is willing, able, knowledgeable, arm's length, all that. That is your indicator of value. The proof is in the pudding. If the market is not bearing you a buyer and you have exposed the marketplace to the listing that is well marketed, that's the answer.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, so Sherry, a quote that I use a lot with that is it's very similar to going and buying a brand new Range Rover and they tell you the price is $98,000 and you buy it for $98,000 and then you drive it off the lot. And then Camille wants to buy it 2 days later and she is not going to pay $98,000 for it because now it's been off the lot. Everybody understands that you buy a new car, drive it off the lot and it's worth less. It's what the market will pay for it, not necessarily what its value, because it's the same car. It's 48 hours old, right? It's the same value, but it has a different perspective of the buyer who's going to be paying for it at that moment.
That's because it's filled with glitter. And that's the segue to the next question from Jason Hainan. How do you deal with the seller saying it's not selling because you're not marketing enough?
Ooh.
We all get that, I'm sure.
So yeah, on occasion, but can you answer it with some facts? Like,
yes.
The first thing I would ask myself is, are they right? Or where are they right? That's a tough question for an agent. Are you being kind of lazy? Are you being complacent? What do other people do for their marketing? Call the bosses in your office. Call the people that are selling. What are they doing? For example, are you doing mailers to your neighborhood? They're very expensive, but they get the word out. Are you doing open houses where you get honest feedback? Are you able to ask other agents to come through and give you honest feedback? There's all sorts of reasons that a house isn't selling. Mostly it's because stubborn sellers don't want to give up their equity and lower their price. As Sula's saying something, I mostly think that if you can't provide value in the form of a salient market analysis, you're going to be beat up by your seller. You got to push back with data. You have to know your market better than your seller.
That's awesome. So Sue chimed in with a question. She sold a 1-bedroom condo for $256 in October of 2023. Now the neighbor wants to sell the exact floor plan. He was totally surprised when she gave him the current comps and they support a price of $190,000. How do you handle that when they are equal, apples to apples? And how do you explain the current market in this situation? It's 25% less. Good question, Sulu. Thank you.
So Sula, that's a dramatic drop. And I would think that there was something other than just the marketplace, because we are not exactly 25% lower than October 2023. The market indicators, I think, are like 6% at a max, even for condos. Condos are surging back too. So watch the under 300 condos. I'm just curious, is there any other site factor or any other thing that you can point to that, because condos are all the same, right? Yeah. They're all the same product, but then one has like a stinky floor plan or one has a stinky view. That one needs to be priced aggressively, right? Is that what's going on?
You can unmute Sula and conversate.
Yes, thank you for helping. I pulled the comps for the last 90 days, and I was surprised myself. So the last one that sold in the same community was 180 a couple months ago, and I couldn't believe it. And of course, they want to hire me because I sold the neighbors for 256. And the other thing is they are Canadians, so they are not even in town, and we're doing everything by Zoom, and they were totally shocked. So they are supposed to call me this week, to go through the comps that I provided them, and they are very similar. So I couldn't believe it.
Sula, can I ask you to do an experiment?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you call the listing agent on the 180 and just say, hey, I noticed that the comps were 260 a year before. Can you explain to me why you think this sold for that? Because that agent has been in the trenches. They are your roadmap. They know what maybe you don't know. It's possible there's something going on with the HOA. I had this exact thing happen with another property where the HOA was not solvent. It could be that there's capital improvements you don't know about. Like, have you fully vetted this complex?
Yes, the HOA is super strong. It's at Las Brisas condominiums in North Central in 7th Avenue, 7th Street and Northern. The 2 bedrooms are selling between last week, one closed for 325, the 2. So I was really happy. But there is from 275 all the way to 325, the 2 bedrooms that were selling at 325 a year ago. And this is a 1-bedroom condo. So it's going to be the only one available. And that will help me. But we're not going to list until we figure this out.
One other thing is just, I would still call the listing agent for that one if you hadn't. Could it have been a distress sale, for example, where they just liquidated it? Are there other comps that support the 180, 190?
Yes, there's some at the Point, just over on 16th Street. Okay. And there so I pull everything at 80.
Just sticking with that one complex, can you go back in time rather than going to another complex? Can you go back in time in that same complex and make sure that that single 180 is not an outlier? It is not an outlier, because you might be surprised. It might be worth 225, but somebody just dumped it. I would hate for you to leave money on the table for your sellers.
Exactly. I don't want to.
Yeah. If you send me the data on it, I'll research it a little bit more and I'll go back in time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sula. So we have another question from Jason. What is your strategy for driving traffic to your open houses? Are you door knocking? Are you email blasting neighborhoods, flyers, postcards? What is it that you're doing to drive traffic?
Everything. Coming soon before it lists. Getting the word out on the message boards in Coronado, which is a huge source of my business. If you find out if where your listings are at have a message board or a neighborhood board, it's good to start getting the buzz out. You don't, obviously, if you don't have it in the MLS is coming soon, don't do that with the address yet. Follow all the laws, but if you have it in the MLS is coming soon, you can pre-market it. You should be listing at the apex of demand. So you should be getting people excited before it actually goes listing. So if it's 6-7 days on market in coming soon status, and it's ramping up, people are starting to call, people might be asking for showings. This is where the apex of demand is, where you should be listing, in my opinion, because you get the flood of people through the doors. They all are kind of like, "Ooh, I'm competing with that person." And there's a buzz around it, right? There's an energy around it. You get your best buyers then. And the answer is I do all of the above. I do hard, like flyers that are really expensive to the neighborhood. I usually do like at least 500, if not more, depending on where your farm is. If your listing that you've got is in your farm, spend money on it. Spend as much money as you can afford, because that will pay dividends for years, like decades. If it's somewhere where you don't really want to list a lot of listings, at least go door knocking, or like at least flyer or door hang the 3 blocks around your listing, right? And we can pay door hangers through like Driggs Title, or their title companies that will do door hangers for cheap.
Yeah.
Do that.
Or Jason also has those door sticker things that you door jammers, I think they're called, that you jam on the door that are just as effective.
I'm sure a lot of people have suggestions about that too.
Yeah.
Camille, as we wrap up here, what are we've talked a lot about all the great things that you do. What are some of the things that we need to avoid? What are some of the pitfalls, the time wasters, things that you have learned that you say, hey, look, I've been there, I've done it, try to avoid it.
Yeah, God, you guys, this is like, how long have you got? I've messed up so often. I've overpriced listings. I've underpriced listings. I've just screwed up. I think the number one thing is admitting when you're wrong, and also, and being willing to change and be open to it, but not knowing my market, not knowing my data coming in the door. Like, you got to be an expert. You got to know more than everybody else in your field if you want to be confident, right? But even more than that, I mean, it's just such a long list of mistakes. Don't argue with your sellers. There's no point in that. Maybe Nick and other people would have different opinions about that. What I mean by that is empathize with them. Like, this is so for some people, this is their retirement. This is it. Right. So see where they're coming from, and tell them everything you're going to do to try to make their dream happen. And still, at the end of the day, 2 things can be true at the same time. The house isn't worth what they want, and you really want it for them, but it's not worth that. But you really want it for them, and you're going to try your hardest, but it's not worth that. Like, stick to your guns if you know what you know. I've made a mistake of being pulled by sellers who have been bullies. That's why I went in to get an appraisal background, to get an appraisal license. I didn't know how hard it would be at the time, but I was sick of arguing with doctors, lawyers, engineers that would come into my open houses and say, well, this isn't worth that much. And I say, yes, it is. And I was in my 20s and they're like, no, it's not. You're a little girl. So I went and got my appraisal license because when they said, well, I'm an engineer, I know what I'm talking about. I would say, well, I'm an appraiser. I know what I'm talking about. You know, become an expert in what your little market is. You got to know every house in that neighborhood.
I love that. Yeah.
Yep. So you also talked about our pre-show discussion about don't beating yourself up for getting value wrong, you know, not paying attention to the meetings and to the Fed meetings, things like that. So kind of just summarize your things to avoid when you're going in and establishing value with these folks that are wanting you to list their home. You know, like, I don't know, kind of, do you set the stage, meaning like you set the expectation, like this is what it's worth, this is why it's worth, this is my data that shows it's worth, this is how I'm going to market it. So as you're doing all that, is there still struggle with them, or are they just kind of submitting? I don't, it sounds weird, but kind of submitting, okay, Camille knows everything because she's just, you know, just pounding us with knowledge, which is fantastic. Do you find it an easier pill to swallow by doing all this and avoiding those pitfalls?
Yes, 1,000 times yes. I had a 2-hour conversation with a client last night just over her financial future, because if sellers are on the fence about selling, talk to them about what they plan to do with the money. You're not a financial advisor, but help them future dream, because sometimes where they start to think about going will motivate them to sell. If a seller doesn't have a compelling reason to sell, and you're not getting a reason, like I always ask when I come in the door, like, what's your reason? What's your timeline? Why are you doing this? And they can't give you an answer, that's not a seller. You need to have a conversation with them that's holistic. And anywhere that you as an agent don't understand the holistic conversation around selling, you're missing something about your marketing piece. Your listing presentation should be a whole thing. It should be like the financial well-being, the emotional, spiritual well-being of these people. You are a counselor of sorts. You're here to be a sounding board to empower them to do the best thing for them. So figure out where their life is headed with them. Like, ask the right questions.
You're going to come back because we're going to have a whole episode about the holistic conversations with the seller, because you just opened that can of worms right there. Like, that's brilliant. So we're approaching an hour. Does anybody else have any questions while we have Camille's undivided attention away? I think you've stumped everybody. You may have answered all the questions.
Everybody's taking notes, and that's why.
Yeah. Jen Jenkins says it's been absolutely amazing. Thank you, Jen. For all of us, thank you. Yeah.
Sure.
Well, why don't we end up by saying, what is the one thing, Camille, one thing that our agents can do this week to help them out?
You guys. Well, it depends on if they're a buyer or seller agent. If they're a seller agent and your listing isn't selling, go see the real estate that's also not selling in your area. Go see the price points that you're competing with. Walk those properties. Speak to your sellers. Get that price reduction because you went into the listing and you're like, oh, this one had a better XYZ than yours, and it's not selling. We need to talk about the price reduction.
What about actually physically taking your seller with you? Like grabbing the seller, say, hey, let's go look at houses in your neighborhood to see what you're competing against.
I would only do that if my seller's argumentative, and I would say, hey, let me show you.
And why is that? Just out of curiosity.
Because the proof is in the pudding. I don't like arguing with people. I just want to show them.
No, I get that you don't want to argue with them. I'm just saying, taking the seller with you to look at, say, there's like in my neighborhood, okay, I have 2 listings and then there's 6 others. Would it behoove me to take my sellers? Let's go look at the houses that we're competing against, so they get an idea what those houses look like compared to ours. Is that a good approach to that, or is it just something we should just do on our own as the expert and then convey that information?
I have a do no harm kind of thought with the seller, like a doctor sort of. I always want to provide value. I never want to take from them unless I have to. So I only would do that if they were argumentative. That's my style.
Gotcha.
I only provide value.
That's cool. That's
so what I would say is, like, if you want to come with me, you're welcome to. Yeah. Like, if that's fun. But most people are so busy that would feel like a burden, I think, for the majority of my agents who are working class.
Oh, that's cool. That's why I asked, because I've done it in the past. I've done it where I've taken clients to go look at what's comparable, but I haven't done it for years. So that just came up in our conversation as a question, like, oh, well, would you just take the seller to it? So
the other thing, Chris, is you might want to be careful with that, because you aren't previewing, unless you're previewing them and selecting the right ones.
Right.
That might actually backfire, because if somebody walks in and they're like, this place is a dump, mine is worth more. Like,
in my particular neighborhood, I see them all. I walk through them all, everything. But it's one of those. I think that was kind of a question just for the whole group here. Would that be something you do? And I think the way you answered it is great. Don't do it unless you're in a stalemate, you're arguing back and forth about value.
Yeah.
Then it's kind of a come to Jesus moment. Hey, let's go look at these 3 houses that are just like yours.
Yeah.
Sula says, thank you, Camille. You're amazing.
Thank you, Camille.
And Nick is chiming in, go and physically seeing the competition is a fabulous idea. He said fab. See the jazz hands, Nick? Plus it shows and tells your client that you are working.
Yeah. I just want to say, if somebody can't go see, if you're an agent that's busy and you can't go see a listing, call the agent. Hey,
Oh, yeah.
what do you think your house is not selling? I am always honest with agents. I will tell you, it's the floor plan.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to work with this floor plan, but the right buyer will have the vision, but it will work
Mhm.
for the right buyer because of XYZ. Let's
Agreed.
talk to each other and have good faith around like being honest with each other, because the proof is really in the pudding. Like if somebody's not buying the house, there's a reason for it. And we all know what that reason is usually.
Yeah. Price, location, or condition, right? The 3 things that Nick tells us that you can only control those 3 things.
Yeah.
Right. Anything else you want to share? Any last minute nuggets of insight and value? Because you've rocked the hour, Camille.
No, I appreciate you guys having me on. And I want to say, like, if you don't have a passion for this, light a fire under your butt and go be the best at your job. And the farm has saved me when I have gone into the doldrums. If you want to talk about a farm, ever have somebody on talking about a farm, that is the one thing I think we can do to be successful agents here,
Okay.
because the farm is what you feed into and it feeds you.
Yeah. Thank you so
That's
much
right.
Camille, for having us. First in many series. Thank you so
Right.
much. We'll be here again next week with Brad, right?
Yep, Brad Brower, the legend. So again, thank you all for coming. This is pretty cool that we had 18 people show up, which is because you always have that fear. Who's going to come? Is anybody going to show up? Is anybody going to be engaged? So you're great, Camille. I learned so much, which is the whole purpose of this. And Victoria Romero says thank you. You're very welcome. Come back next week. And then so Nick, to stop this, I just press stop recording and we're good, right? Okay, so there you go. Until next week, this was Elevating Your Voice
Thank
with
you.
Camille, Chris, Mark, and all of you. You guys rock. We'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.
Bye.